Hi everybody, my name is Hannah Roeschlein. I am a stand-up comic from Indiana who just recently moved to Chicago, and we're here today joined by Dr. Clifton Saper. Dr. Cliff, tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, Hannah, it's nice to be here with you. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work for a large health system here in the Chicago area, and I'm the director of all the behavioral medicine operations. So I was born in LA, actually, and my dad was in grad school. He had been a medic in World War II, and under the GI Bill came back, and he was able to go to graduate school under that, being funded by the government. And my mom is a Holocaust survivor. She was born in Vienna, and in 1938, when the Nazis came into Austria, she was put on a train by her parents and sent to live in England. And her whole family was then murdered, and so she never saw them again. And so she met my dad, who was from Brooklyn, and got married, went with him to LA for him to go to graduate school, and she was an artist and occupational therapist, and that's where I was born.
What a mix.
Yeah, they then moved, when I was a year and a half, they moved to Austin, Texas, where my father, who's also a psychologist, became the chief psychologist for the state hospital in Austin, Texas. And so I was this little toddler living in the nurses' quarters in a state mental hospital.
And those are some really formative years to be around individuals that are, spooling through different types of mental health issues.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that really.
And that was my world. I mean, I didn't really understand that there were other people in the world besides patients and doctors.
Beyond, your entry points in with, that being sort of a familial path, what beyond that motivated you towards some of these things?
Well, so I went into international relations. I thought I was going to become a diplomat when I went to college. But what was fascinating me in college was community work, working with underserved children, getting involved in policy making, and the courses I was interested in tended to be the psychology courses. And so when it came time to decide, what I wanted to do next, I looked at my transcript and realized I'd never taken a poli-sci course. Therefore, how was I going to become a diplomat? And I'd taken a lot of psychology, so that's when I decided I'm really interested in community psychology and delivering mental health to underserved communities and access to mental health services, etc.
You also do some improv comedy, correct?
Yeah, so for the last 8 years I've been doing improv comedy, and our group is called the Therapy Players, and we're all therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors.
Let's get into this a little bit personal-wise, and what led you exactly into comedy and more specifically the improv side of the street?
Beginning in high school, really, I was interested in theater and the high school musicals. My little group of friends would do improv games. So I got the bug in high school, and moving around a lot, you have to sort of develop a way to make friends and a way to be social, otherwise you just retreat and hang out in the back. And so I found that trying to be funny and comedy would be a really good way to make friends and find a group. I just found that in terms of the work I do with mental health and therapy, that I'm often saying to people, you gotta learn to laugh, you gotta learn to play, you gotta learn to be childlike and spontaneous, that in fact, that's a real healthy strategy. And when you talk about Buddhism and sort of mindfulness and meditation and Zen, it's all very present oriented. And I actually call that like anchoring in the present, rather than worrying about all the crap that happened in the past or worrying about what might happen in the future, but to stay anchored. And I think being spontaneous is what improv is all about. And it's like, it just all fits together for me of, can you anchor yourself in the present, be present, and if that leads to something funny, great. If it just leads to you being authentic and you being you, that's great too. And sometimes that can be funny.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There, I think there's almost nothing funnier than authenticity at times. Now, specifically, go deeper in for us and tell me about this psychology improv troupe that you have going on.
Yeah, so about 8 years ago, a few of us who had taken improv courses, we started to communicating. And so my buddy, who's Dave Carbonell, had done improv when he was a graduate student here at DePaul, and we crossed paths. And so I said, I think there might be people interested. And I said, I might even be interested in doing this if we put it out there. And so we put it out on a listserv, and we got many, many responses of people that had taken a course at Second City or IO. And so we auditioned people. And the only requirement was that you had some experience with improv and that you were a therapist. People were yearning for it. And we started right away performing at conferences, mental health conferences, where people are listening to paper after paper after paper and getting bored. So they wanted some type of relief, of comic relief. And so they would ask us, would we come and perform at these conferences? After we did those conferences for a while, we thought, the general public thinks mental health and therapy is funny. It's like a niche. Either people have been in therapy, or they've seen therapy on TV, or they just think therapists are just funny.
No doubt, or want to diminish it with a joke even.
Yeah. So we started performing here in Chicago at storefront theaters. And suddenly we were in demand. What we perform and what we make fun of is just everybody can relate to. People think that treatment and therapy is so serious, but there's such a funny, absurd way to look at it and perspective. And I think unless you can sort of step back and see the humor and absurdity in many things in life, you're gonna have issues and problems. You need to be able to laugh at yourself, and that's what we really endorse.
But now, Dr. Cliff, I'll say some things kind of in summation. What are some of your personal things that you incorporate into your day-to-day that help you kind of stay on top of your mental health and, the optimization of that?
In my job, I do a lot of sitting in meetings, and meetings can get really ponderous and boring, and I bring my sense of humor to those meetings and say to people basically, why are you taking this so seriously? Let's step back and how important is what we're talking about, and make fun of stuff, and make fun of myself. And that has helped me in terms of my work life. In terms of home life, I also just use a sense of humor a lot, and rather than catastrophize.
Do you have any tips for anyone out there that is seeking some sort of grounding or wanting to kind of get into therapeutic-like situations, though, but potentially are without, like I said, health insurance or have an ability to see someone on a clinical level? Mm-hmm. Any little tips or tricks?
Well, I think especially now that people have been so isolated for the last 2 years, I think connections is really important. So I do think people should seek out others, whether it's online or on the phone or in person. Don't just isolate, because now that's what you've been doing for 2 years. Really push yourself to get out there and be involved and connect, because in some respects we've all been in this together, and just have the courage to take that risk. Also, online now and on your phone, there are all kinds of therapies and talking heads and stuff you can get started with that will give you a few skills, and then figure out, well, where do I go from there? People have to have skills in order to manage overwhelming feelings, because sometimes people think if I just vent and yell and scream, it's going to be okay. But I think what people need to learn is that there are ways to better manage those feelings and those thoughts that might be irrational, and you need to sort of learn those. So that, there's online apps and there's self-help books. There's a lot of community mental health centers. You can give you access even if you don't have money.
I was going to say, there's been times where I feel like when I was back home in Indiana, I was able to find someone to see on a sliding fee scale and things like that. I know that like what you're saying.
Students,
yes.
Graduate students sometimes are working in hospitals or working in practices, and they're often free or low cost. And then the most important thing is people just need to breathe, right?
Yeah.
Right? And just breathe. And a big belly breath, right? And breathe in and hold it and breathe out. And that, like you mentioned, grounding, that anchors you in the present right away. And we do that in improv as well. How important that is.
Every time I'm usually mucking it up on stage, it's because I haven't taken a breath. Just to get all the way back in there. I think I started a meditation practice regularly last February, and it changed the complexion of my entire life. But that's what we're talking about, those skills where once you learn that you possess within yourself a free tool of simply being able to somewhat manipulate a system that's going on with you, and as you know, immediately within even its physical, mental, just it touches everything quickly and powerfully. It's meant to, as you can breathe your heart rate down, you can accelerate it, just through those certain things. So I definitely think I completely agree with that.
And I think people need to know that they have the skills to manage that. It's not enough just to say, oh, that's horrible, oh, that's terrible, be very sympathetic. It's better to say, you know what? You have the skills to manage those overwhelming feelings if you put them to use. If you learn them well and put them to use, you can manage. I can't make the horrible things go away, but I can encourage you that you, in fact, have those skills to manage those feelings.
Dr. Cliff, that was honestly all the questions that we had for you, but that was incredibly informative. I was so thankful to hear, like I said, all of the initiatives and the things that you've taken the time to create, not only, for those in the healthcare field, but, on stage as well.
Thanks, Hannah. It's, you opened me up to think about some things that I hadn't really put together before, so I appreciate that.
I appreciate it as well. I take some improv classes myself, and I look forward to seeing you out there.
Right, and I'll come see you do your stand-up.
I appreciate that.
And we're at therapyplayers.com.
Therapyplayers.com.
At home, living in the suburbs, and that really got to me. So I went through a bit of depression, dealt with anxiety, and I realized at some point that, I really need to do something about this. So I started seeing a therapist, went to go see a psychiatrist. And when I started having these conversations around mental health with some of my family, I realized at the time how strong the stigma still existed around mental health. And so I realized then and there that I needed to kind of start the conversation with them and with so many other people who felt the same way.